Hello, good morning. Welcome to Thoughts and Updates in sunny Scotland. We've had a little bit of snow this part of the country. There's much bigger flurries of snow all over the country than there is here, which is, to my mind, rather unfortunate because I quite love the snow. But it's been, aye, it's been a week. There's lots that is happening all around us in this world. So rather than be a sort of self indulgent person this week, I've been reflecting much because it is Children's Mental Health Week in Scotland um, on things to do with the brains and indeed their mental well-being. In terms of writing, before I get there, because that's the major part of today, it has been a week of writing where I have looked at where we are in the boxing world, and there's not been a lot to actually talk about because there's not a lot been going on. Scott's boxer Lee McGregor has had his European title fight postponed for the fourth time. It was meant to be in Dubai, and the rest of the card that was supposed to be there last night has been shifted to Doncaster, though his fight has not, because he's clearly fighting somebody for Europe and there's going to be travel restrictions and all the rest of that kind of going on. I've also been contemplating, I'll come back to the whole deal with Daniel Kinahan and the Panorama expose during the course of this week. For Ringside Report, the yesteryear boxer has been Ivan Mendy. Leon Spinks has obviously passed away overnight, and that's something I'll be looking at probably for next week to reflect upon. Guy who beat Muhammad Ali, therefore didn't necessarily endear himself to people who were huge Ali fans. And also the giving of the Medal of Freedom noted this week that Dolly Parton had said she turned down twice the Medal of Freedom from Donald Trump. It would appear because of the restrictions in travel, or her husband was ill at the time, and I wonder if there is another reason for that, given her very public charitable works, very good works for the needy and those who require particularly help in literacy. Also, for Scottish Football Supporters Association, with two pieces I've stuck out Facebook today from last week, looking at David Martindale and his rehabilitation, as well as Dick Campbell's interview. So this week I'm working through the whole thing to do with Aberdeen. And so yesterday Derek McInnes lost 2-0 to Hibs, rather than Aberdeen losing 2-0. I think Derek McInnes may well be Shigley Peg time, and of course the Kilmarnock manager has gone. In terms of French review, a couple of things this week looking at the space, but also Catstrand. Today is the last day of a piece that I'm looking forward to watching later on today, which is about strike from the 1970s, an original piece, a new piece from a theatre company down in the Dumfriesshire area, which hopefully will entertain me for at least the 60 minutes that it's on. So, what have I learned this week? A couple of things. Daniel Kinahan and children's mental well-being. Let's start with the boxing, okay, and let's get that out of the way first. On Monday night, I think it was, Panorama hit the headlines with an expose of the underworld in boxing and how the head of MTK, Daniel Kinahan, one of the founders of MTK originally was Macklin's Jim Marbella. MGM became Mac the Knife Productions, and MTK, Matthew Macklin, closely associated with it. Daniel Kinahan being an alleged crime lord in Europe, now based in Dubai, of all places. He clearly, according to the Panorama documentary, is someone who has a large influence in the boxing world, and some kind of dodgy past, present, and potentially future. Boxing has no universal regulatory body, unlike other sports, so until such times as there is regulation to that extent, with a unification of those bodies to make that a possibility, then there will always be the opportunity for people who may not be wholly clean or indeed particularly wholesome to have a sway over the boxing world. That is a massive thing for the boxing authorities to deal with, because it's an overview that other people will start to take the boxing, if it has continued to have that kind of connection with the underworld, that you are then sullying, suggesting there's a possibility that things are not very good. Judges' scorecards, fight fixes, putting people up for competitions that they're not ready for, people taking falls. I mean, the list is endless. If you have people who are involved in lawlessness, then where does it stop? Don't know if it does stop. Boxing has always had that kind of connection to the underworld. If you consider the life of people like Sonny Liston, the 1950s and the 1960s in Las Vegas, and the way in which the mob controlled boxing at the time, there's plenty of examples of how the underworld and boxing were cheek by jowl. But we are in 2021, and the allegations need to be addressed. Now, we had people who were brave enough. The editor of the Boxing News, Matt Christie, I read his piece in the Boxing News this week, and he took the view that he could not stay silent, and he needed to at least have something to say, and he did. He said it very eloquently and very well. Also, former world champion and head of his own organisation, who has suffered the loss of quite a few fighters, the Clonus Cyclone, also went public. Now, Barry McGuigan's appearance may well have put a target on his back. As somebody who comes from Ireland, that's probably not unusual. The fact that Panorama members of staff have had death threats, credible death threats, made against them after the broadcast of the television show is both cliched and indeed hardly surprising. The question is what happens next. The boxing world shrugged it off and said, oh well then, we knew this. This is nothing new to see here, let's move on. How they move on, I have no idea, because this is a stain that is not going to go away. If Daniel Kinnigan comes out and shows himself the complete bill of health and tells people that he is not connected to the allegations, to the shooting in the Dublin hotel where they attempted to murder him apparently, to all of these things, these shocking things that were suggested in the documentary. Can we move on? I don't know, but we have to try. Next, it's okay to not be okay. This week is Children's Mental Health Week. Now, I've been around people who've attempted suicide. I've been around people who have been mentally unwell. I have spent a lot of time dealing with the effects of mental ill health. It's a subject matter that over the last few years has gained a lot of credibility with a lot of skeptics at the site. Just like ADHD, dyslexia, autism, we are beginning to get to grips with what it actually is and what it means. And as a society, as we come out of this, and that includes me, we need to find a new format of dealing with people whose mental ill health is not as good as it should be. It is little use to anyone to referring back to the way that things were. And there's a kind of growing up, I think, for me in terms of that. I've had my own battles with it, and I've not gone public, if you like, even with those closest to me, with what those were. I know what the feelings of worthlessness are, because I'm an alcoholic, I'm an addict who has spent 30 years attempting on a daily basis to improve how I behave, what I do and what goes on, and I'm still not there yet. I don't know if I'll ever be there yet. But I won't stop trying, and I won't stop doing something that's different. A few years ago, many years ago, somebody said to me, when I suggested that I wasn't feeling great and there were things, just ignore it and get on with it, he said. And it was wrong. I couldn't ignore it. I had to deal with it, and I've always dealt with it. I never told people what it was that I felt or how I got through it, but I took responsibility for my own mental ill health and dealt with it. I didn't parade it in front of people, though I've always been open about my addiction and my alcoholism. I have often got it right and I've often got it wrong, but I've often not ignored it. Those closest to us can suffer silently and not be supported in the way that they should be. And to those people that I missed, I'm sorry. It was a genuine miss. It wasn't something that I did deliberately because I wanted to see people improve without support. But the one thing I know through my own battles is to find things that I put in my own pathway that give me the resilience to keep going and keep carrying on. That resilience is key to me. To find an ability to cope, especially in industries where they have a conceit of themselves of being liberal, like the arts. They're really rubbish at it. There's no point in seeing it in any other way. We can have lots and lots of examples of how the arts have brought to our attention mental illness, homelessness, drug addiction, alcoholism. But within the industry, we don't necessarily have the types of things in place that are going to support those people who are going through those very same issues. In fact, often they're not only castigated, they're also sacked. And that should change. I hesitate to say has to change, because the fact of the matter is that the pressure that's placed upon the industry, which is entirely unfair by people who watch Netflix and don't think about the effect that they have on people, who demand their next box set, their next fix, who pay a fortune to these companies, but turn their nose up at the breeding grounds of the ability of people who start out in the industry, the theatres, the community theatres, the amateur theatres, the performances from people who need to make mistakes on a regular basis, the youth theatres, the drama schools, the dance academies. They require exactly the type of support that the arts hold up as a mirror to others and say, why aren't you doing better? And we need to do better. I need to do better. We all need to do better. And there are people who use it in order to get away with things. And it increases some people's scepticism because they don't believe that they're being genuine or they're being honest. There are people out there who are like that. And I've met them, and I've come across a few, and I've called them out, and I've been called for it. And sometimes I got it absolutely right, and sometimes I got it wrong. And hands up, I did. But I've never thought it was an argument against supporting those people who are genuinely suffering. And I've seen it. Boy, have I seen it. I've seen it close up. And I've seen the aftermath. And the work that I do every single day, and the reports that I hear every single day, convince me we're not in the midst of the tsunami of mental ill health. We're in the middle of a crisis of support because we have reduced and removed, especially for kids who are in working class areas and who are in care, the type of support that they absolutely desperately need. When the current waiting time, even before the pandemic hit, for people to get any kind of support from a mental health service if you're a child and adolescent, can range between 13 to 53 weeks in the United Kingdom. That is a national disgrace, and I see the effects every day. I hope you don't, and hope that everybody else doesn't. And if you are suffering any form of ill health, reach out, ask out. And for the rest of us, we need to listen out. So, till next time, bye for now.